The story of wolfsbane as a weapon began not on a battlefield, but in a philosopher's garden. In the 4th century, before the Common Era, Theophrastus of Eresus, a student of Aristotle, bent over a peculiar plant with dark, hooded flowers. He recorded its name, aconiton, and noted with clinical precision that it thrived in the harsh volcanic scree of Mount Aetna in Sicily. Its beauty, he wrote, concealed a profound and rapid lethality. This knowledge was not merely academic. Foragers and healers across the Greek world already knew to handle the plant's fleshy roots with extreme care. A single misstep, a cut on the finger while digging, or a mistaken identification for an edible herb could lead to a terrifying end. The poison worked with a swift, creeping numbness that began at the lips and spread inward, a silent paralysis that could stop a heart long before a physician's herbs could offer any counter. Theophrastus's writings preserved this deadly secret for scholars, but the practical truth of aconite lived in the hands of those who worked the land. They saw what happened to livestock that grazed near it, and they understood its power. Here, in the rocky soil of a Mediterranean volcano, the foundational knowledge of a future battlefield toxin was first codified, a botanical fact waiting for a more violent application. Centuries after Theophrastus first catalogued the deadly aconiton, another scholar bent over his scrolls in a different empire. Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist, dipped his stylus into ink and began recording the plant's properties in his monumental Natural History. He described its use by hunters, who would smear the root's extract on bait to poison wolves that threatened their flocks. The plant's dark blue, hood-shaped flowers, he noted, concealed a violence that worked just as efficiently on men. Pliny's meticulous account went beyond folklore. He documented the symptoms with a scholar's detachment, a creeping numbness that began at the lips and tongue, a paralysis that seized the limbs, and finally, a catastrophic failure of the heart. His words preserved a crucial toxicological truth. The poison did not need to be swallowed. Contact with an open wound, even a small one from a hunter's blade, could deliver a fatal dose. This Roman encyclopedia, copied and recopied by scribes, became a vital vessel. It carried the precise knowledge of wolfsbane's distinctive morphology and its mechanism of death out of antiquity and into the future. The dark blue hoods of the aconite flower and the lethal secret they held were now permanently inked into the historical record, awaiting the next era that would seek to weaponize them. Centuries after Pliny's warnings, the dangerous knowledge of wolfsbane did not vanish. It retreated into the quiet scriptoria of European monasteries, where monks meticulously copied ancient texts. In these candle-lit rooms, botanical wisdom became sacred duty. A Benedictine brother in a Frankish abbey, his fingers stained with oak gall ink, carefully transcribed a Greek description of aconite's properties onto fresh parchment. His quill then paused. He dipped it again and began to draw, not the plant's distinctive blue flowers, but its most potent part, the twisted, tuberous root. The illustration was precise, showing the root's forked, almost claw-like shape. In the margin, he added a stark warning in Latin, radix mortifera, the death-bearing root. This 9th century herbal was a manual of medicine, but also a catalogue of poisons. These manuscripts travelled. They passed from monastery to monastery, from healer to apothecary. The detailed drawing of the root served as a critical identifier, ensuring that anyone preparing a tincture for pain would not confuse it with a harmless herb. The knowledge was preserved, not as a weapon, but as a perilous fact of nature, waiting in vellum pages for a time when it would be needed again. The knowledge preserved in Frankish monasteries did not remain on parchment. It travelled east, into the hands of warriors. In the 11th century, along the mountainous borders of the Byzantine Empire, enemy archers prepared their weapons with a grim purpose. They worked not with powders from books, but with a dark, viscous paste, smearing it thickly onto iron arrowheads before a battle. The Byzantine princess and historian Anna Komnene recorded these tactics with clinical horror. She described the paste as a sticky, plant-derived substance used by the empire's foes. Her account suggests a standardized, battlefield-ready poison, not a rare curiosity. The goal was clear: to ensure that even a glancing hit from an arrow could deliver a payload far more deadly than the wound itself. This was a tactical evolution. The poison transformed a simple projectile. Where a clean arrow might disable a soldier, a poisoned one promised a certain, terrifying death. The psychological warfare was as potent as the toxin. An army facing such arrows knew that a single scratch on the shield wall could be a death sentence, spreading dread long before the first volley was loosed. The knowledge of that dark paste from Byzantine arrows travelled west with returning crusaders and merchants. By the 12th century, the fear of poisoned weapons had settled into the chronicles of European warfare. A French writer recorded a chilling incident during a skirmish in the Holy Land. A knight, struck by what seemed a minor arrow wound to his shoulder, dismounted without alarm, but within minutes a strange tingling crept across his lips. Back in his tent, the knight's attendants watched the numbness spread down his jaw and into his throat. He tried to speak, but his tongue felt thick and useless. His hands, which had gripped a sword hours before, now trembled uncontrollably. The shallow puncture showed no sign of festering, no angry red inflammation typical of a septic wound. This was something different, a poison working from within his blood. Then his breathing grew ragged and shallow. He clutched at his chest as a violent, irregular pounding seized his heart. There was no slow bleed, no fevered delirium, just a swift, silent failure of the muscle itself. The chronicler noted his death with grim efficiency. A single, shallow strike had felled an armoured man. On battlefields far from home, the rules of chivalrous combat were being quietly rewritten with poison. That single, shallow arrow wound described by the French chronicler did not happen by chance. Its lethal potential was crafted deliberately, often in a quiet corner of a camp or a dimly lit workshop. Here, an armourer would take the most potent part of the wolfsbane plant, its gnarled, dried root, and begin the careful, dangerous work of transformation. He would place the brittle root on a stone slab, crushing it with a heavy pestle. The rhythmic grinding reduced it to a fine, greyish-brown powder that released a faint, earthy scent. Every movement was deliberate, for inhaling even a speck of this dust could bring on a tingling tongue and a creeping numbness in the fingers. Next, he scooped the powder into a small clay pot, adding a dollop of rendered animal fat or sticky pine resin warming over a low flame. He stirred the mixture with a stick until it formed a thick, dark paste. This viscous poison would cling tenaciously to an arrowhead's grooves or a dagger's edge, waiting to be delivered into the bloodstream of its target. The poison, once smeared on the arrowhead and driven into flesh, began its silent work. Aconitine seeped from the wound into the bloodstream, a chemical invader racing toward the heart. Within minutes, the first symptom struck, a sudden, searing burn across the tongue and lips, as if the victim had swallowed hot coals, though nothing had passed his throat. That burning sensation swiftly dissolved into a creeping numbness, a deadening wave that stole feeling from the face and extremities. His fingers grew clumsy, his vision blurred. Then came violent, uncontrollable retching as his stomach convulsed. All the while, the toxin was sabotaging the delicate electrical rhythm of his heart, sending it into a frantic, chaotic stutter. His chest tightened, breath coming in ragged gasps that could not satisfy his starving lungs. The world tilted, shadows crowding his vision as his pulse became a weak, irregular flutter against his ribs. Within the hour, the arrhythmia overwhelmed the muscle. His legs buckled and he collapsed onto the churned earth, a life extinguished not by the arrow's puncture but by the ancient poison it carried. Yet even as the poison's physical effects were understood, a different kind of barrier emerged. In the year 1139, within the echoing halls of the Second Lateran Council in Rome, church leaders gathered to condemn a specific practice. Their decree explicitly forbade the use of poisoned arrows in warfare, branding it a sin against God and man. This religious prohibition found a powerful echo in the secular world of knights. On the tournament field, a warrior's honour was his currency. The code of chivalry dictated that a true knight faced his opponent openly, blade against blade. To kill with a toxin smeared on a weapon was considered the act of a coward, a betrayal of the very essence of martial virtue. This powerful stigma, both legal and cultural, created a chilling effect on the historical record. Chroniclers, often monks or scribes in service to noble houses, were far less likely to document the dishonourable use of aconite. A knight's death from a venomed arrow might be recorded vaguely as a misfortune, the true cause whispered in shame rather than written in ink. The chronicles and condemnations painted a picture of fear and dishonour, but they left a crucial question unanswered. Did these poisoned arrows truly exist on the medieval battlefield, or were they merely the stuff of terrified legend? For centuries, the evidence remained locked in written accounts, until a discovery in the cold earth of Switzerland shifted the investigation from parchment to physical proof. Archaeologists excavating a 15th century site unearthed a corroded iron arrowhead. Unlike ordinary finds, this artifact was sent for advanced forensic analysis. In a modern laboratory, scientists dissolved minuscule samples from its surface, separating centuries of grime, to search for a chemical signature that could confirm an ancient practice. The results were definitive. Chromatography revealed traces of plant-based alkaloids clinging stubbornly to the metal. This was not ambient soil contamination, but a residue deliberately applied. The analysis proved the technical possibility. A medieval armourer could indeed coat a projectile with a botanical toxin, turning a simple puncture into a delivery system for a deadly dose. The forensic evidence from that Swiss arrowhead led toxicologists to a modern laboratory. There, under sterile lights, a researcher prepared a sample of purified aconitine. Using a micropipette, she transferred a single milligram, a speck barely visible to the eye, onto the edge of a sterile scalpel blade. This minuscule amount was all she needed to demonstrate the poison's terrifying mechanism. She placed the treated blade in contact with a solution mimicking the ionic environment of human tissue. Connected sensors began tracing the electrical activity of synthetic nerve cells. The moment the aconitine molecules made contact, the data stream erupted into chaos. The toxin structure allowed it to wedge itself permanently into the sodium channels, the microscopic gates nerves used to fire signals. With those gates jammed open, sodium ions flooded the cells uncontrollably. The precise rhythm of nerve firing collapsed into a lethal, continuous scream of electrical noise. This was the silent, molecular catastrophe behind the medieval accounts of numbness and cardiac arrest. Aconite's power wasn't magic. It was a precise, irreversible sabotage of the body's own electrical grid, effective at doses a knight would never see coming.